we'll go ahead and jump in. So like I mentioned, this is our Polaris webinar series. We've been hosting these since the summer. We've got a blog on our website. There's a lot of content there. If you haven't visited www.tridentproposals.com, I invite you to check it out. Lots of really great content. Probably will anticipate some of your questions. And we've just been tallying up the questions that we get, trying to give out a lot of information to help make this bid easier for you. So
yeah, and for a while there, we had it in separate little blogs, but we combined it into like the mother of all Polaris blogs. Yep. So it's all in one place, and I think we'll probably figure out a way to have you download that into an ebook or something too. It's getting weighty, but it's a good do-it-yourself sort of guide. All right, got a joke for you guys. How do you know if the person you're talking to is a U.S. Navy SEAL? He'll put it on the slide. Yeah, never gets old, Rebecca. I'm sorry. Anyway, so I'm Jeff Everidge. I'm the president and CEO of the company Trident Proposal Management, of which we're representing with our polos today. And in the company, other than leading the company, doing much of the business development, I mainly am a orals coach, coaching orals for mostly large bids like BedSim and that kind of thing, but a lot of small ones as well. So if you need a oral presentation coach, shoot me an email. Do some capture. I worked at Booz Allen for a bit. That's how I got into the government contracting game. And before that, I was a director at PricewaterhouseCoopers. So a little bit about me. What we do with these webinars is I do a little bit of like why Trident, and then I turn over to Rebecca to go deep into the content of the presentation. So we get rid of the painful branding part first. So just a little bit about Trident, service disabled, veteran-owned small business. It was founded in 2008, so we have been around for a while. Definitely have lasted through lots of ups and downs in government contracting. We're full service, so we do everything from identify opportunities for you to bid, help you do capture and proposal support across the board. Any proposal activity that you need done, we can do that, and we can come in and out transactionally or run the whole thing and write most of it for you. We'll say that we've done a ton of research for smaller businesses where we identify contracts, and then we'll be your research analysts on a retainer basis and just keep looking for you and keep helping you figure out if you're going to bid or no bid contracts. So that's something that I know a lot of smaller businesses use this for. The larger businesses use this for capture and proposal. And then we do training as well. If you need in-house training or coaching or mentoring or side-by-side, just that's one of the things that Rebecca manages at the company, and we're quite good at that as well. All right, so here's a question for you, which is why would you outsource bid decision support to a company like us, Trident? And we have a package you can see on the right. We have a package. It's priced at just under $2,000. It's a loss leader for us. Literally, we've priced that very aggressively to get your business, and we just go through your paperwork to see if we think you should bid or not, or if you should maybe try to get on a team. And why would you want to do that? Well, first, it gives you this unbiased look, and you're going to see from Rebecca that she has dived deep into the Polaris contract and every draft release and all the Q&A. So she understands not only from a research perspective, but from doing a lot of these big IDIQs that GSA puts out. She's helped a lot of companies get onboarded. So our team is expert at figuring out if it's really possible for you to bid. So it alleviates that admin burden from your team as well. It evaluates you based on the latest guidance. So you know that we're going to evaluate you based on what's going on now. Connects you to potential teammates because we have a large customer set. We're really well connected in the industry. But the big thing is it allows you to decide early. And I say the best bid decision is a no bid decision done quickly, because it allows you to first get that off your mind. Headspace is cleared. Second is you divert all those precious resources of time, energy, people to the activities that can actually win you new work. So that's why we think you should outsource it to us, and this is how you do it. And it's really simple process that Rebecca and the team, the research team, puts you through pretty quickly to get you that bid decision. So without further ado, now I'm going to introduce Rebecca. So I've done a lot of positioning of her already, but one thing Rebecca's really good at is being thorough. And she has been thorough with her research of Polaris and putting together a series of webinars that have been deep expertise. So one thing that we know for sure is that we're putting together plenty of artifacts. Rebecca is doing plenty of artifacts that you can use to make your own bid decision and help you get through this on your own. Because you don't have to spend money on Polaris, but if you do, we hope you spend it with us. Anyway, so Rebecca, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. So I am not a Navy SEAL, but I was in the Navy. I'm a reformed surface warfare officer. Spent about 7.5 years on active duty, transitioned to the reserves. I'm married to a SWO, so still plugged into that community. And I've got about 7 years at this point, little more of DoD and proposal writing experience. And I do come from the, I started on the proposal management side. So what's good about that is that all of the things that I'm about to present to you are done through the lens of challenges that I think you're going to have, or that I foresee teams having when they pursue these bids. I'm also the co-author of FastProp, which is Trident's system for responding to proposals. And we recognize if you're a large business, you probably have a lot more resources than some of the small businesses do, but there are still some critical items that need to happen in a certain order. So FastProp is all about helping you prioritize your resources and your efforts to still put together a compelling, compliant proposal. And there's more information about that on our website. I am Trident's GWAC lead, and as Jeff mentioned, I also lead the market research team. So we're constantly prospecting for opportunities, staying plugged into what's going on with different agencies, what's coming down the pike, and just keeping a finger on the pulse there with regard to acquisition trends and what's happening in the federal government contracting market space. Okay, let's see. So what we're going to talk about today, give you a real quick overview of Polaris. I know we had the holidays, so we're going to clear out some cobwebs, just make sure everybody's reoriented to what the most recent guidance is. I'm going to walk you through kind of an overview of the scorecard and evaluation process, because this may not be something that you have encountered before if you're used to writing proposals and submitting them and having them go through a different kind of evaluation. I'm going to walk you through a couple tips for self-scoring your projects correctly. Like Jeff mentioned, we've got some artifacts on our website. You could do this on your own, and if you have that capability, more power to you. That's fantastic. We just want to make sure that you are doing things the right way and saving yourself some frustration later down the road. I'm going to share with you some strategies for maximizing your points in volumes 2 and 3, and then also give you some recommendations for what you should be doing between now and the final RFP release, which should be imminent. So, like I said, quick opportunity overview. This is a GSA-sponsored government-wide contract that's coming out. It's going to be multiple award. It's IT service-oriented, and it's only for small businesses. So everybody that bids on a team has to be a small business in NICS code 541512. We know this is going to have a 5-year base period. The GSA has confirmed that there will be on-ramps. We'll kind of have to wait and see what the periodicity is going to be of those. So they haven't committed to a set schedule that, there'll be an on-ramp every year or anything like that. It's going to be based on needs of the government customers as well as the small business pool and who's graduating, who's got what capabilities, kind of play that by ear. I mentioned that it's small business set aside and everybody has to be a small business in NICS code 541512. They are planning to have 4 pools: the service disabled veteran-owned small business pool, the woman-owned small business pool, a hub zone pool, and a small business pool. They think they're going to make about 310 awards, and we'll dive into some more specifics around that in some subsequent slides. And they have promised that this is expected in January or maybe February of 2022. So it could be any day now, or it could be a month from now. But this is what we're expecting for the small business and the woman-owned small business pool. GSA has confirmed that those will be the first 2 pools competed, with service-disabled veteran-owned small business and hub zone following later in the year. And by the way, I know that I talk quickly. One of my other New Year's resolutions is to try and slow down on these conversations. I just get really excited when there's so much information to share. So if at any point you have a question or you need me to repeat something, or you want to pull the thread on something, I am keeping an eye on chat. I'm not looking at anybody's video. I think we have those turned off for the participants. But if you need to get my attention, please just pop something in chat. and we can take a timeout, because that's the benefit of dialing into a webinar with Triton, is that if you have a question, we'll answer your question. It's not a one-way briefing. So please do take advantage of that while you're on this call.
And Rebecca, I'm watching the chat as well.
Thank you so much. Okay, so understanding the scorecard system here. I mentioned that this is not your traditional proposal. So, if you spend a lot of time in the government contracting world, you've probably seen these points-based evaluations before. If not, you might be more familiar with the LPTA and the trade-off evaluations that you see. Polaris is not using either of those. So it's scorecard evaluation, where they're going to look and see if you meet a certain element, and if you do, then you'll get a certain number of points assigned based on that. As part of this evaluation, they are not looking at cost and pricing at the master contract level. So as part of this first onboarding, you're not having to submit any kind of price information. That does mean that at the task order level, we expect some pretty fierce competition, but it could also simplify and streamline this master award process. So it's one less thing to do when it comes to preparing your proposal. So really what GSA is looking for is what they call the highest technically rated qualifying offerers. And that's basically the people who score the most amount of points. And so everything that we're going to talk about subsequent to this slide is all about maximizing your scores so that you can be at the top of the pile. You have to be among the top scores in order to get an award. If you again spent any time in government contracting, you've probably seen some acquisitions where they say, hey, there's a baseline score, and anybody that scores above that automatically gets onboarded. Or maybe there's a lower threshold, like for Seaport, if you have Navy experience, then you automatically qualify. Polaris is not like this. It's going to be a very competitive, score-driven evaluation. And then if there are tying scores, because that can happen, where if you have 100 people in the small business pool that all have the same score, and that 101 company also scores, then they will also get an award. So that's why they say they expect about 310 primes, because there's a little bit of variation if people are scoring the exact same score. If there's even 1 point difference, that's not going to be good enough. You have to have the same score as somebody else. So you can see the breakouts here. They expect about 100 awards in the small business pool, 60 for Hub Zone, 70 for service disabled veteran-owned small business, and about 80 for woman-owned small business. So the way that they're going to do the evaluation, and there's some interesting things in here, is that the first thing they're going to do is every offer is going to have to submit a self-scoring worksheet where you grade yourself. And you say, yes, we meet this criteria, we meet this criteria. We think our score is 90,000 out of 100,000 points. And so what they'll do is they'll rank the proposals based on those self-scores. And that's the very first thing that shakes the bidders out. So if you rank yourself as having 50,000 points, you're probably not going to be considered in the top pool. But they will give everybody a ranking and then move into the next phase of evaluation, which is making sure that for all of these preliminary qualifying proposals that they have submitted, that they meet the acceptability review. And we'll talk about what that is. But that's basically pass-fail criteria. So the first thing they want to do, get a number assigned to each bidder based on your own declarations, and then they're going to make sure that you meet the pass-fail criteria. But if they find, while they're doing this acceptability review of the pass-fail criteria, that there is something that you do not meet, your proposal gets removed from consideration, and they'll notify you that you're no longer being considered for the bid. If they remove somebody from consideration during this sort of step 2 process, the guy with the next highest point score that was below the qualifying pool, he moves up and now gets his proposal evaluated. So it's really important, what I want you to take away from this is that anything you claim actually be true. And for the acceptability review, you have to dot all your I's and cross all your T's and make sure your paperwork is locked down, because you don't want to get disqualified on an administrative technicality. So once we get through that, the pass-fail acceptability rating, they are going to look and see.
Hey, Rebecca, we've helped a lot of companies with a lot of proposals, and we've seen these cases where someone does something dumb and the government comes back and said, hey, you did something dumb, fix it. Is that the case here? And does the GSA do that?
For this first round, we're not expecting them to. They are being pretty cutthroat. They probably use the term efficient. But yeah, there's not going to be room for dialogue on these things. So it's very binary. You know, can you back up what you've claimed? Do you meet the pass-fail criteria? And are you among the highest scores? Is kind of the big picture process for this. So yeah, the dialogue that might normally happen where they're like, oh, you forgot to date or sign this piece of documentation. Like, sorry, no. That's why we're really encouraging people to dig into the details now so that you're not disqualified on one of those technicalities, because that would be a shame.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Yep, good question. Okay, so after we go through the pass-fail criteria, then they're going to be looking at your self-scoring documentation or your self-scoring worksheet and seeing if you actually have substantiation for everything that you've claimed. So if you claimed that you had experience in a certain NICS area and you didn't submit the project documentation for that whatever points you claimed get deducted from your score. Once they make the adjustment to your score, if you're still amongst the highest scoring offers in the pool, you might be able to hang in there and continue the evaluation process. But if that drops your score beneath the threshold of the preliminary qualified proposals, then you're done at that point. And the GSA is just going to go through this cycle until they reach the number of qualified bidders that they're looking for. And once they do that, then they're going to stop evaluations and announce the contract awards. So it's just really, really important that as you're going through this process and getting your self-scoring worksheet put together, getting your documentation tagged and highlighted, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, that you're doing everything accurately and you're making it really easy for GSA to grade. So if you've got a really complicated evidence trail, you're going to want an independent set of eyes to make sure that somebody else who's not you and with your bias and your inside knowledge can follow the same logic and award the same points that you have awarded yourself. I know it sounds salesy, but that's the benefit of getting an independent checker, is that they're not going to be biased and they're not going to be swayed by the amount of effort that you put into this. They're going to go with the black and white evidence of what's on the page and what you're able to prove. And that is really important in these points-based evaluations. And little motherhood and apple pie, if the evaluation team discovers something that's misleading or falsified or fraudulent or that they don't concur with, then you get eliminated from further consideration. So that's pretty standard, but bears repeating that if you stretch something too far, if you misrepresent something, you will be disqualified from consideration. Okay, so I mentioned this acceptability review, and this is in section M.4 of the draft RFP. Should be pretty straightforward, right? These are all pretty boilerplate contract general information. So it's going to be the signed SF-33, but again, making sure that you fill the blocks out correctly in accordance with the instructions, that you completed your documentation and self-scoring worksheet. If you are part of a joint venture, you need to submit that agreement, and there are specific regulations and requirements listed in the draft RFP about what these agreements need to include. Same thing with subcontracting letters, the professional employee compensation plan, and your uncompensated overtime policy. So these are all the things that they're going to look at as part of that step 2 pass-fail review once they look at what you've scored yourself at on your score sheet. So again, pretty straightforward, but don't be lulled into thinking that because it's straightforward, it's easy. There are still details that you need to account for. Okay, I just wanted to show you a scorecard breakdown, and this again is based on the draft RFP, so we could see some changes in the final RFP, but just by way of orienting everybody here, there are 6 volumes right now laid out. The first volume is volume 1, it's that general information, so that's the stuff that we just talked about with the self-scoring worksheet, the SF-33, professional, or the uncompensated overtime plan, the professional compensation plan, those kind of things, pass-fail basis. Volumes 2 and 3 are really unique on Polaris because those account for at least 70% of your points. So if you've dialed into any of our previous webinars, if you've looked at any of our blogs, we are hammering this idea of relevant experience and past performance and getting your projects right, because this is where the lion's share of the points are. And we will dive into some specifics here because, again, since volume 2 and 3 are going to show you the best return on your investment, we wanted to spend some time talking around the nuances that are embedded in the instructions. If you'll notice on this, I've blown out the sub-requirements of relevant experience and kind of listed them here. Anything that is shaded in light blue, so the L.5.2.2.3 through 2.2.6, Those points are only eligible if your project that you are submitting was performed, if it's your prime experience for a federal customer. If you are using subcontract experience or experience, that you gained as a subcontractor, or if it was commercial experience, you are not eligible for these points. And I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind. For a lot of these areas too, there are maximums. So it's not that you'll get points for every single project that was cost reimbursement type or every single OCONUS project. There are limitations, and it's really important to understand where you're maxing out and what you're trying to take credit for. And we'll talk about how to figure out what your best bet is there. I do want to mention a couple more things on this slide before we move on. So for past performance, right now, GSA has said that this is an all or nothing category, and you will get points if you have a satisfactory record of past performance or higher. We'll see if that sticks with the final RFP. We've seen other evaluations where they will actually break out a spectrum, and an outstanding will score you more points than a satisfactory. Because this is small business and because they're allowing commercial experience and past performance questionnaires to be submitted, I don't know if they're going to go the route of the spectrum where you get more points for better scores, or if it really is going to stay binary. Volume 4, if you've read through the draft RFP, you'll notice that everything in this category is optional, but please don't be tricked into thinking that optional means that it's less important. This is, there's 11,000 points to be awarded in this category, and that can absolutely make the difference between you having a qualifying bid or not being competitive, amongst the other offers. The things that are in this category are things like having a cost-approved accounting system, an approved purchasing system, facility clearance, the ISO certs, or CMMI. Yeah, I always like to add extra M's in there. So if you have those, if you have the documentation for those certifications and the system certs, then you certainly want to submit those, but make sure that they are up to date, and make sure you have all of the information that's called for in the draft RFP, because it tends to be more than just what's printed on your certificate. And by that, I mean, you need the name of the person, their contact information, your email, the address. There are some really specific requirements. So it's not necessarily just as simple as saying, well, here's a copy of my certificate, that's good enough. That may not meet the threshold depending on who your certifying authority was. So just wanted to mention that. Risk assessment, this is a category that is probably going to sink a lot of teams. And we can spend a little bit of time talking about that when we get into the actual point permutations. Volume 6 is just the responsibility volume. So this again is pass-fail criteria, and this will be where you have to submit your financial statements and demonstrate that you are a reputable company that is trustworthy with government contracts. So we're not gonna spend a lot of time talking about those pass-fail criteria because there's not a lot you can do about them. You have them or you don't. Just want to reiterate too, if you are pursuing a small business award, the maximum score for that pool is 91,500 points. If you are in one of the set-aside pools, your maximum score is 100,000 points. So you want to make sure that as you're tallying up where you break out, that you understand if that's out of 91,500 points or if it's out of 100,000 points. And it's that risk assessment category that's a little bit different. So we can talk about that in a little bit more detail here as we go. Okay, so scoring your projects. I briefed this slide, I think, in the last 2 webinars, and we're going to talk about it again because it's really important that you be on the right page and following the right guidance from the get-go. Make sure that anything you're submitting as a project actually qualifies as a project. So you can see we've listed the criteria here directly from the draft RFP, but at a high level, it needs to, whatever project you're using, whether it's for relevant experience or emerging technology, it needs to align very clearly to one of the categories set forth in the draft RFP. So if that's the relevant experience, there are 5 NICS codes that are permissible, and you have to demonstrate that your project included elements of that and that it was integral to the performance of the project. So the GSA hasn't said that it has to be a certain percentage of the tasks or that it must only be what the contract was coded as, but you will have to submit a project template form to the government, to the contracting officer that oversaw the project, and get them to validate that the project did in fact align to the NICS code that you are claiming. The next bullet is really important. You can only use the project once in a pool. So if you are one of those companies that hedging your bets and bidding on multiple teams within the small business pool or within the woman-owned small business pool, make sure that you have not given the same project to multiple teams, because if GSA sees that on multiple proposals, it will get pulled from all proposals and will not count for you at all. So you can only use a project once per pool. Any project that you nominate has to be ongoing or completed within the last 5 years. And so you can kind of assume a date of February 2022 as the RFP date shifts, as the release date shifts. You might get a little leeway here, but that could be a bad news story if you have a project that's right on the cusp of being within that 5-year periodicity. So I'd encourage you to kind of keep an eye on that and look for what the final guidance is based on release dates and submission dates. Every project that you submit needs to be complete or have at least 1 year of performance, and the value needs to be at least $250,000. And that is true whether you're using your project as primary relevant experience or emerging technology. So again, just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page there. And there are some really specific requirements as well in the draft RFP about what counts and what doesn't as it relates to contracts versus task orders versus IDIQs. And the short story is you can't claim an entire IDIQ as a project. It needs to be if you have work on an IDIQ, it needs to be a task order from that IDIQ. Okay, so you'll hear us talk about, if you've been on these webinars, if you've looked at our blogs, getting your documentation in order. And what I mean by that is taking a look at what's actually been reported in, just as, for example, FPDS, and making sure that you know what the government is going to grade you on and where they're going to look for the information. So, you know, if I'm looking at this record, and this is not real, this is this is one that we've pulled up and modified and redacted any identifying information from. But I wanted to show you what the record is going to look like in FPDS, just in case you're not familiar. So, you know, for example, I'm going to look at the type of award that it was. This contract number here and the task order number is going to be really important, because every single piece of documentation that you submit to substantiate your points needs to match these numbers. So if you have a statement of work that does not have the contract number on it, you're going to have a really hard time convincing GSA that that's the right statement of work for the project. There will probably be some guidance related to how you can, you know, map this evidence chain, but just understand that there's some risk if it's not very clearly titled on your award documentation that is the same task order or PWS for the actual contract. Okay, and Bill, I see your question. What are your thoughts about a collection of task orders in an IDIQ? So right now, those are all being treated as distinct projects. So they haven't said that you can't submit a bunch of task orders under the same IDIQ, but you cannot aggregate them and have them count as one. So really good question. Again, we're working off a draft RFP, so is it possible things could change? Yes. Is it likely? Probably not for that category. I think they're going to keep things distinct or keep the task orders as distinct projects. We also get the question sometimes about, well, what if we had the contract and then there was a follow-on contract? If it's a separate entry in FPDS, it's likely going to be viewed as a separate project. Just put that out there to kind of preempt that question. Okay, so moving on with the record. Thanks for that question, Bill. That was really good.
Hey, Rebecca.
Yep.
That's something that you kind of blew by, but has always been hard whenever you have to get someone in the government to respond to anything to validate something. So one thing that just to put out there is that for this one, the first thing you're going to want to do is send out those documents to get the government to validate, right?
Yeah, and in fact, in our recommendations, you know, we've been asking people to update your Rolodex now, make sure you still have contact information, give the government a warning order that says, hey, we think we're going to be bidding on Polaris and we're going to be looking for you to back us on this. Just wanted to give you a courtesy heads up so that you're ready when the request comes in. So yeah, absolutely, Jeff. That's a really good point, that you're going to want to take into account the turnaround time required for these. So that's why the prep work is so important, is if you can have everything ready to go once we have final solicitation guidance from GSA, then you're going to be better positioned than your competitors, and you're not going to be stressed out in the 11th hour of proposal submission because you're waiting on somebody to email you back and you don't know if they're going to say yes or no to your claim.
Yeah, and putting my capture hat on, if you've been trying to think of a reason to talk to your client, you now have one.
Yeah,
Give
absolutely.
them a call.
Yeah, it's a good business development move too. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so other things to look at on your record, right? Making sure that your period of performance start date and end date is correct. If you have had a lot of modifications to your task order, you're going to have multiple FPDS entries with the mods, right? And you could look up here and see if there are. So for those cases, right now the guidance is that you're going to have to submit the original FPDS record as well as the most recent modification. So you may have two FPDS records that go in for projects. Just putting that on your radar. The obligation amount, this is something that's really interesting. So we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to some of the other slides, but one of the things the GSA has said is that if your project is complete, then you will get credit for the actual dollars obligated. Makes sense, right? If your project is ongoing, you can take credit for the total contract value that would be in this block, which for some task orders, your ceiling is going to be higher than what actually ends up getting obligated over the course of the contract. So if you have a $10 million ceiling on an ongoing project, that might be a better project to use than something that is still in progress, or something that is completed with a lower value. So sometimes we have this bias towards, well, if it's done, it's in the books, it's good, we should use that. When it comes to project value, that may not necessarily be the case. Likewise, it could go in your favor in the other way, right? So if you had something that was only supposed to be $7 million, but by the time everything was said and done, the government extended you, or they gave you an amendment and they increased the ceiling, then if your actual dollars obligated on your completed project exceeded that ceiling, then you'd absolutely want to use that record instead. So I just mentioned that because it's a way that it's a factor that might sway which project you put forward in your scorecard. Okay, another really important note is it is possible to get additional points for having multiple government customers, not contractors. You are the contractors, they are the customers. And the way that GSA is going to evaluate that is they're going to look at this funding agency ID. So you'll see it's a 4-digit code for this one. Sometimes there's 5 digits, but this is going to be really important to look at for your projects, because in your mind, everybody does this a little bit differently, but you might say, oh, well, it was for the Marine Corps. If it was a different funding office in the Marine Corps, you might actually be able to claim credit there. Or if you might not realized or remembered that it was actually the same funding agency, even though maybe the end customer is different. So it's really important to get your documentation straight here and just know where they're going to look to award those points or not award those points. You are only eligible to claim credit, by the way, in that category if you're using Prime experience. Okay, so moving on with the records, making sure that the legal business name and the entity name is reflected correctly on your records and that it tracks to who you are today. So if your company's gone through innovation, if you've gone through an acquisition, if you've got one of those other meaningful relationships that's specified in kind of the volume 1 criteria, just making sure that the government understands whose experience you're representing and trying to take credit for. The type of contract, if it was a cost reimbursable contract, it's going to tell you right here. This one was not, it was fixed price. So you would not be eligible for those cost reimbursement type points. But if this says cost plus award fee, if this says cost plus fixed fee, and if it was your prime experience for a federal customer, then you're good. So again, this can be really simple, right? If your FPDS record says everything that you need it to, that might be the only thing you need to submit as your documentation along with your project template form. That's best case scenario. And then just moving on, looking at the place of performance, if you're trying to claim credit for OCONUS performance, I will just tell you now, it's going to be tricky for a lot of companies to substantiate because it has to be sustained. It doesn't have to be the primary place of performance, but you need to have had a presence there for greater than 180 days. And the way that you're going to have to be able to prove that, you might be able to do it through the statement of work. It just depends on how things are worded. So a really easy way to do it would be as if this place of performance was actually OCONUS. That'd be easy for the government to say, yep, clearly you were doing things in Japan or in South Korea or in Italy. But if it doesn't say that, then you're going to have to think through how you're substantiating points for that category. And then, last but not least, certainly the NICS code. If the NICS code is one of the 5 that's permitted, and this 541512 is, then if that's on the FPDS record, then you may not need additional justification here. If this is something else, because things get coded with different NICS codes for all kinds of reasons, then you're going to have to actually dig into the statement of work and look at what the work performed was and make your case that you should get credit for one of these other categories. Okay, any questions about that record checking? Okay, so here's what everybody came for, right? Is the actual, dollars to donuts about how to boost your score. So the number one thing you can do is score your projects individually and actually crunch the numbers on all of these things. By the way, we do have eligibility checklists that you can download from our website. The draft RFP that was released in September has the draft score sheet. Or if you purchase one of our packages, we'll do this for you, and we'll run the permutations on about 10 projects for you to help you figure out how each of your projects score. But the reason we want you to do this individually is that you don't know until you actually look at all the categories where your point boosters are going to be. So just as an example, if we look at Project A, which was prime experience for a federal customer, it was $400,000, so it meets the project threshold. It was a cost plus fixed fee. It was a task order on a multiple award IDIQ. It had OCONUS performance, and we did cybersecurity. That checks a lot of areas. And so, at first glance, you might be thinking, okay, that one looks really good, especially compared to Project B, which is experience that we have as a subcontractor, but it was for $10.2 million, and we also did some cybersecurity there. So I'm giving it away in my tone here, right? But if you were to actually run each of these projects through the score sheet, the subcontract experience is actually going to come out a couple hundred points higher, because even though it doesn't hit any of these categories in the middle, the value is so much larger that you're going to get a 3,000 point boost for having something that's over $10 million. So we just don't want you to be, thinking that because you've got points in more areas, you've got more points, if that makes sense. So it's a little bit of a nuance there, but it's really important. And again, it's not something you're going to know unless you actually put a point value next to all of your projects. Any questions about that? Okay. Remember that done is not always better. And we talked about this a little bit when we were looking at the project value, right? So the way that it's phrased in the RFP is that project value for completed projects is determined by the total obligated dollars. So that's what actually ended up getting spent. Project value for ongoing projects is determined based on the total estimated value, including all option periods. So like I said, for a lot of those task orders with a really high ceiling, that might be your better option, is something that's ongoing, as long as it meets the other project requirements, being within the last 5 years, having performance for at least a year, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Third thing you're going to want to do is submit as many qualifying projects as you can. You can submit up to 5 primary relevant experience projects and up to 3 emerging tech projects. Now, there are some caveats here, right? For the emerging tech projects, you don't get credit for having like duplicates in an emerging technology area. So if you have 3 projects that are all in automation technology or artificial intelligence, you're not going to get additional points for those. You'll get credit for 1 project. But if you have projects that are in different emerging technology areas, then that's where you start to see the point boost. For the 5 relevant experience projects, you can have multiple projects in one NICS code. You just won't get the points for NICS diversity, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the bottom line is you're going to get some qualifying points. If you have a qualifying project, you're going to get some baseline points for having that project. But then you have to remember that in volume 3, which is past performance, you would get an additional point boost there. So we just don't want you to leave any points on the table by saying, well, I have 5 projects, but 2 of them are in the same NICS code, so I don't want to submit that. That would be disadvantaging yourself for no reason. So just submit as many qualifying projects as you can. And again, I know that's not possible for every small business, but if you've got them, use them. Okay, so looking for ways to diversify. This is true in 2 categories. So I already mentioned the diversity in the NICS codes. Every time you can claim credit in a different NICS area, you get a pretty significant boost, especially if you can cover all 5 areas. I mean, this 8,000 points, if you can have a project in every single one of the 5 NICS codes that's in that draft RFP, that 8,000 point boost is like having 2 more projects. And so this is a really good advantage that can boost your score, or that can make up for a teaming point penalty, and we'll talk about that in a second. The other way to diversify would be in emerging technology. So if you can cover 2 technology areas, you would get 2,000 points, 1 for each project, plus 700 points for showing diversity in those technology areas. If you can show experience in 3 emerging technology areas, then you get an additional 1,000 points. So that would be 3,000 points for each of, 1,000 points for each of the projects. So 3,000 points there, plus another 1,000 points for diversity. Okay, limit teaming. We had a whole webinar about this. There's a whole blog section about this. If you are teaming with somebody else on Polaris and you have not teamed with them before in the same relationship proposed, and that's an important caveat, then you are going to take an 8,500 point penalty. So those are 8,500 points that will not be available to you on the score sheet, that will be available to other people. If you have to team, which in some cases you might need to in order to have the minimum number of qualifying projects or to round out your portfolio, make sure that you run the numbers on all of your projects and you run the numbers on your teammates' projects so that you are selecting the projects that have the highest individual scores first, and then looking at how those projects would complement the portfolio to do things like get your point plus ups in these diversity categories. Because there's no point in teaming with a partner that you haven't worked with before if they're not going to help your score. You are going to be permitted to add subcontractors after the IDIQ award. So teaming with somebody at the onset and taking a penalty for it, if it brings your score down, would not be an advisable strategy. So just to keep it simple, we're recommending limiting teaming unless you have worked with those companies before or they're providing a point boost to your bottom line. Okay, and then focus your efforts. So this is where it really is important to understand where it's best to spend your time between now and RFP release and what's going to get you the best point plus ups. So in this slide here, each one of these bullets is worth 3,000 points. So the effort required to get these 3,000 points is not equal though, and that's really what I want you to understand. So you could spend your time, and this is probably not even feasible for most of you now, right? Like if you have these certs in process, or in progress, you might want to keep going. But at this point, if you don't have CMMI, if you don't have the ISO, you may not be able to get it in time. But just, you could get your CMMI level 3 and ISO 9001 and, ISO 20,000 and ISO 27,001, and that would get you 3,000 points. Or you could go find a project that covers an additional NICS code area, and that would be the same point plus up at the end of the day. So, the TS facility clearance, like that's pretty binary, right? That's not going to get pushed through in time. But if you are on a team and you're looking at forming a relationship with somebody that has one of those, maybe that's your point of entry. But again, all of this is to say that because these efforts aren't equal, you're going to want to think through what the best use of your time is. So, at a high level, it's finding large projects. Those tend to be better. Finding projects that cover more areas, or unless it's a very high value subcontracting experience, prioritizing the prime contracts for government customers, because that's where those additional point categories, like we saw on the scorecard that is shaded in light blue, those are the ones that are going to be eligible for more points at the individual project level. So those are the things that you can kind of keep in mind as you're looking at projects to submit for Polaris. Any questions about that? That was a lot of me talking. Don't see anybody typing, so maybe it was all clear.
There was so much content there, Rebecca. That was really well done. It's just just really thorough and quite quick too. So maybe give everyone a chance to think through any question at all that you might have with regards to the Polaris contract.
While you're doing that, I can give you our recommendations for things that you need to be doing yesterday, really, right? Because we've said we're in the window. This thing could drop tomorrow, could drop in February. Maybe it's going to be your Valentine's present. I don't know. But regardless, we want you to use this time right now to reconfirm your bid strategy and pool eligibility. If you check out our most recent blog article, I talk in there about pool eligibility and the importance of making sure that your records are in order, right? If you are a woman-owned small business in particular, I will tell you that there are only certain circumstances where you can still be a self-certified woman-owned small business and eligible for this pool. So the regulations changed recently, and now you either need to be SBA certified as a woman-owned small business, you need to be third-party certified as a woman-owned small business, or you need to have a contract, a set-aside contract that was awarded to you as a woman-owned small business that is still ongoing, and then you can get grandfathered in. But if you're just a self-certified woman-owned small business, I would expect, based on the language in the draft RFP, that self-certification is not going to be good enough to qualify you for the woman-owned small business pool. So it's little things like that, right? Like if you haven't checked your DSBS record online in a while, if you haven't looked at what's actually being reported in your profile, you may want to take a look at that, because the government does server migrations, they do system upgrades, and most of the data transfers, but sometimes it doesn't. So we just encourage you to get into your records, look at it from the government's point of view and what's going to be reported to them, so that you know if you've got any issues out there that you might need to anticipate. Okay, so that ties into the next bullet, right? Making sure all your records are up to date. Have you actually looked at your FPDS record? Is it accurate? Does it say what you think it says about all of these categories that the government's going to score you on? Watch out for unnecessary point penalties. This could be in the form of teaming. This could be in the form of, if you are competing for a socioeconomic set-aside pool, then the other element of the risk assessment is making sure that the company with the socioeconomic set-aside is presenting at least 50% of the projects. And by the way, this goes for joint ventures as well. So if you formed a joint venture so that you could compete in a pool other than the small business pool, you need to make sure that whichever entity has that socioeconomic status is putting forward 50% of your projects, which is 3 basically, because right, we want to max out our 5 that we're entitled to, 3 or more projects, so that you don't take another 8,500 point penalty there. Start marking up your evidence. I walked through it pretty quickly, but that was because everything on on the record was something I put there. Your record may not be that clean. You might need to go into your statement of work. If you're claiming credit for cybersecurity services, the government has said you need to highlight the paragraph in the statement of work that says that you did that. And it can just take some time to make sure that your Adobe PDF has the right sticker with the right highlighting in the right place. And again, that somebody else coming behind you would reach the same conclusion that you reached about why you deserve those points. And then, lastly, don't lose sight of the big picture here. If your goal is to get on Polaris for the sake of getting a contract award, you've got the wrong goal. You really need to be thinking about this in terms of long-term success. So is this a contract vehicle that's going to work for you? Is this something that you're going to be able to drive business to? There's going to be a minimum contracting threshold. So you don't want to be one of those companies that gets on Polaris and then gets invited to leave, shortly thereafter because you're not doing any work on it. So are you ready to make the investment? Are you ready to do the business development to go out and find your customers and manage the things from the programmatic level that are going to be required of holding this GSA contract? We want you to be successful for the long run, not just for this initial award. And so thinking through your teaming decisions, your investment decisions, and kind of your company strategy in terms of where you want to grow and operate is really important right now and can save you some heartache. Because if Polaris isn't right for you, that's okay. There's a lot of other opportunities out there. And if you need help finding them, we'd be happy to do that. But this is not the end all be all, and it's not right for everybody. So just make sure that it's a good match for you before you go investing all the time and effort. So
yeah, because it's just a hunting license. That's exactly it. It's not the game home to your family. It's the hunting license to go out there in the first place. And that's I even think of that, Rebecca, but there's that quick no bid decision it definitely saves you time, energy, money when the task orders start getting sent out on this thing as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So it's not for everybody. And I wish I think in the next deck, we should put in that capture to proposal document that shows the awards for the, the predecessor contract, because not a lot of companies got, like a few companies got a lot of work and a whole bunch of companies got a little bit of work. So you got to think about that too. You got to mean it. You got to want to bid and try to bid and, bid on these task orders and win some and do all that work too. So
absolutely.
Yeah. People laugh because they a lot of times I'll get calls from friends that are saying, "Hey, talk to my friend. He wants to break into government contracting," and I tell them that we'll talk. I'll talk him out of it, and I almost always do. But because if any of you guys are in the game of government contracting, it's a hard game to play for sure.
Yep.
Cool. Any questions from anyone on the team? Or if you wouldn't mind, if you're even listening, please put something in to thank Rebecca for all this hard work and effort. And if you need to go back to this, I believe we're going to be putting this up on the website. Is that right, Rebecca?
Yeah, we'll have the presentation, I think the recording available.
Yeah, for sure. So please, if you're watching, listening still, say something nice to Rebecca to thank her. Thank you, Rebecca, for doing such a great job on this very thorough presentation. Thank you, Bill. Glad you're able to come. Thanks, Kotzen.
Thanks, guys. Okay.
All right.
So just as we're wrapping up here, we've got a couple minutes left.
Yeah, Janelle says thank you too. Thank you for coming, Janelle. Appreciate it.
I did mention we have the checklist available for download on our website, completely free. Only costs you your email, and that's just so we can keep you up to date with other Polaris news. We will not spam you. We're very, very sensitive to that, and we don't have the time to do that either. And then just in terms of next steps, so courses of action, if you are interested in pursuing a relationship with Trident, or you recognize that you need some help and want to move forward, there's multiple directions you could go, right? If you decide to no bid, we can help you do that. If you want to bid alone, we can help you do that. If you want to build a team, we're here for you. If you want to be part of a team, we can also help with that element. So really the important thing is to reach out. Let's have a conversation about where your company's at, where your head's at. Just know that, we apply our proven GWAC and IDIQ process to approaching Polaris. So we can spend time talking a little bit about what makes us successful and what's repeatable about this process to make things efficient and work for our clients. And then again, we do have some pre-packages or some packages that are available. And what I want you to remember here is that we've got a couple of the pre-RFP packages left, so we could start our partnership today. We only have a limited number of these because we know that there's going to be an investment required on our part, and we'd like to get partnering with you sooner rather than later. If you wait until after the RFP drops, the price does go up because then we're going to be in crunch time and trying to assemble all of your documentation and keep up with the Q&A and amendments that we know are going to be inevitable as part of this proposal process. So we're just encouraging people to team with us. If you're going to get help early so that we can get you on the right road to being successful on Polaris. Anything I'm forgetting to highlight here, Jeff?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, fantastic.
Right.
Well, thanks so much, everybody, for dialing in. And I'll hang on if you want to ask us anything. Be happy to field your questions. But really, thank you so much for your participation today and for dialing in.